to shut me down but left shaking their heads when they saw everything was perfectly legal. She tried organizing a petition, but most of the neighbors were just as sick of her as I was. She even tried blocking my contractors from entering the neighborhood, but that backfired when one of them turned out to be the brother of a city councilman. When the drawbridge was finally installed, the whole neighborhood was watching. It was a thing of beauty, a sturdy wooden platform controlled by a simple pulley system. I gave it a test run, pulling the rope and watching with satisfaction as the bridge lifted, leaving my driveway completely inaccessible. Karen, of course, lost her mind. "This is insane. You can't have a medieval fortress in the middle of the neighborhood." "It's not a fortress. It's a security feature," I said. "You know, for protecting my property. HOA rules encourage security improvements." She let out a strangled noise and stomped away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Later that night, I was woken by rustling outside. I peeked through my blinds and saw Karen creeping around my trench with a flashlight. She was inspecting the drawbridge, probably looking for a way to sabotage it. I grabbed my phone and started recording. "Looking for something, Karen?" She whirled around, nearly losing her balance. "I was just making sure this ridiculous thing isn't a hazard." "You mean trespassing?" I said. "Because that's what it looks like to me." She scowled but quickly composed herself. "I'm on the HOA board. I have the right to inspect potential violations." "That's funny," I said, "because last time I checked, the HOA doesn't own my property. But don't worry. I'll be sending this video to my lawyer and maybe even posting it online. I'm sure the internet would love to see the HOA president sneaking around private property in the middle of the night." Her face drained of color, and without another word, she turned and hurried back to her house. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word had spread about Karen's midnight snooping, and people were starting to turn against her. She tried spinning it, claiming she was just doing her job, but no one was buying it. Meanwhile, my story was gaining traction online. The video of the trench and drawbridge had gone viral. Thousands of comments praised me for standing up to HOA tyranny. Karen must have realized she was losing ground because she switched tactics. If she couldn't beat me with rules, she'd make my life miserable in other ways. The fines kept coming. Ridiculous ones, like unauthorized modifications to property and creating an unsightly structure. She even convinced a few loyalists to file noise complaints. But I was ready. I'd been gathering evidence of her abuse of power. And when the final showdown came during an emergency HOA meeting, I pulled out my folder, listing her misdeeds. Fraudulent fines. Misuse of HOA funds. Intimidation tactics. Within minutes, Karen was voted out as HOA president. By the end of the week, an investigation into her shady dealings had begun. Watching her SUV being towed away was the most satisfying thing I'd ever seen. Karen went quiet for a few days, which was unsettling. But I knew she wasn't done. Sure enough, the storm came. Anonymous reports. Fake complaints. Even claims my trench was a safety hazard. Then, one night, I woke up to a loud crash. Someone had cut the ropes to my drawbridge. It was half collapsed into the trench, the wooden planks cracked from the impact. I grabbed my phone and checked the security cameras. There she was. Karen, in all black, like a low-budget ninja, holding bolt cutters. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. By the time they arrived, Karen had fled, but the footage was all they needed. The officers dragged her outside. She screamed about being harassed, but the cops weren't buying it. They arrested her for trespassing and property damage. The neighborhood exploded with gossip the next day. Turns out, Karen had been pissing people off for years, but no one had dared stand up to her. Now that she'd been publicly humiliated, the HOA had no choice but to take action. They held an emergency vote to remove her entirely. A few days later, I received an email from an investigator about HOA fraud cases. Karen's financial misdeeds had caught the authorities' attention. I handed over everything, every fine she wrongfully issued, every shady transaction I uncovered. Within a week, the investigation turned into a full-blown legal case. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was a scam artist. She had been skimming HOA funds for years. When the news broke, the neighborhood lost its mind. People who had once feared her were now openly mocking her. Her house went up for sale. It sat on the market longer than expected. Eventually, she had no choice but to sell at a loss and leave town. I stood on my driveway, watching as she loaded the last of her things into a moving truck. She shot me one last glare, but there was no power behind it anymore. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast as the truck pulled away. With Karen gone, the HOA board crumbled. The neighborhood voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. People were happier without it. No more ridiculous rules. No more fines. No more fear of stepping out of line. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt free. As for me, I became a local legend. The Trench and Drawbridge story spread far beyond the neighborhood. News outlets picked it up. Soon, I was being interviewed about my brilliant act of defiance. The drawbridge, now fully repaired, became a permanent feature. Kids called my house Castle Jake. One evening, as I was grilling steaks, an older neighbor stopped by. He'd lived here longer than anyone. "You know," he said, "I always thought someone would take her down eventually. But I never imagined it would happen with a trench and a drawbridge." I laughed. "Sometimes you have to get creative." He grinned. "Well, whatever you did, it worked. This place is better without her." I nodded, flipping the steaks. "Yeah, it is. And for the first time since I moved in, I actually felt at home.